Hello, everyone, and welcome to Astrology Discussions. So, today we're going to be discussing the Firmicus Maternus, his book called Mathesios Libri 8, which is basically 8 books that he wrote about ancient astrology. Now, one of the reasons that we're having discussions about astrology is because once you reach a certain point, when you're reaching reaching the ancient books that are thousands of years old, the best we can do is try to collect information that we have and have a discussion to try to see what makes most sense in terms of what the tradition says. So there was something really fascinating that I found in his fourth book. This is a compilation book. It has 8 books. And in his fourth book, he has a very interesting discussion on the chart ruler, which is very different from practically what I've heard up until now. And I'd like to discuss how this chart ruler formula is so different. And it has ancient roots, as Firmicus Maternus shows us. I'm not sure who else discusses this, but I guess we'll figure that out as we discuss it. So let me know in the comments if you have seen this. This is his cover of this book that we're going to discuss. Let me know in the comments if you've seen a chart ruler that has been calculated in this way. So as you can see here, we're going to read the text out of the book. This is page 138. And it says, Ancient Astrology, the ruler of the chart. So he's going to get into the actual details by the third paragraph, and we'll get into that. But let's see what he says. He says, you must carefully observe the ruler of the chart, whom the Greeks call oekodis potes. He himself controls the sum of the whole chart, and from him the individual planets take their power of forecasting. If he is well located in signs in which he rejoices or is exalted, or in his own house, and the chart is of his condition, and he is not attacked by malefic planets or lacking protection of benefic, he predicts all good things according to the quality of his nature and the whole number of the years of life. But if he's impeded by malefic planets or deserted by benefic, then he languishes and his efficacy is weakened. 2. I shall explain this with all the information from the ancient scholars so that you can find the ruler of the chart. Some have said that the ruler of the chart is the planet which is located in favorable houses of the chart, in his own house or his own terms. So he said favorable of the chart in his own house or his own terms. Okay, now I don't understand exactly what that means. He says some have said that the ruler of the chart is the planet which is located in favorable houses of the chart in his own house or his own terms. So, the question becomes, if this is what the ruler of the chart is, and what happens if you don't have a planet, that's in a favorable house or in its own house or its own terms? What are the implications of that? Next, he says, but others have figured from the sun and moon, arguing that the ruler of the chart is the one in whose terms the sun and moon are found. That is, meaning the sun in the daytime and the moon at night. There is some point to this theory. Others say that the ruler of the chart is the ruler of the exaltation of the moon. Still others maintain that the ruler is the one whose sign the moon enters after she has left the one in which she has found the birth. So this is interesting. He gives like 4 or 5 different options for what a chart ruler is. And then he confirms after, he says, we follow this last method and it is universally approved, but consider everything we have said carefully. We shall instruct you with an example. So I'll show you a chart example of what this means. So just to repeat the end, he said, still others maintain that the ruler is the one whose sign the moon enters after she has left the one in which she's found at birth, which basically means wherever your moon is at birth, look at the next sign over, and then the ruler of that sign is your chart ruler. That is what Firmicus Maternus, who is from over approximately 2,000 years ago, I think it was in the 3rd century AD. This is what he says. And not only does Firmicus say that, but he says that this is something that practically is universally approved, right? He said, we follow this last method and it is universally approved. But he says, but consider everything we have said carefully. We shall instruct you with an example. What's the example? Suppose the hour of birth has the moon in Aries. The next house, the moon would be the moon would be in Taurus, and Venus is the ruler of Taurus. It's the same with the other signs, but we must note. So, what does he say? He says, if your moon is in Aries, the next house would be Taurus. The ruler of Taurus is Venus. So, therefore, Venus is the chart ruler. He said it's the same with the other signs, but we must note that neither the sun nor the moon can be the ruler of any chart. For as rulers of the whole, they disdain individual rulerships. Therefore, if the moon is found in Gemini on the day of birth, then neither Cancer, which is the ruler of the moon, for that is, he writes in the house of the moon, nor Leo, which is the house of the sun, can show the ruler of the chart. When she has crossed Cancer and Leo and comes to Virgo, then she shows the ruler of the chart. Mercury is a ruler of Virgo, so becomes a ruler. So he says in this case, what if somebody's moon is in Gemini? Right? So the next sign over would be Cancer. And the ruler of Cancer, which is the moon, would be the chart ruler, but he says that the moon or the sun cannot be the ruler. So you go to the next one. After Cancer comes Leo. And Leo's ruler is the sun, so that can't either rule your chart. After Leo comes Virgo, whose ruler is Mercury, and Mercury can then rule your chart. Now, the only qualm I have with this is that it feels like it loses a sense of validity if you're moving over like 3 signs or something in order to find the ruler of the chart. You know, how the question, I guess, is what is the validity of this idea of just moving signs over? And besides this whole idea of chart ruler being moving over one sign after the moon, what is the source for this, and why does this make sense according to astrological according to the consistency in terms of how astrology is done? You know, I've heard of this idea once before where you move one over, I think in when it comes to, I don't know, perfections or something like that, or zodiacal releasing with Chris Brennan, but I don't really understand the nature of it, you know, as opposed to, for example, a planet being in its own sign makes sense that it's comfortable, something to that extent. This idea of moving over, I don't really fully get that. Now let's look at a chart of Oprah Winfrey, actually, and try to see what it would look like on a visual, right? So for Oprah, her moon is in Sagittarius in the 1st house. Okay, so according to this rule, you'd move one over to Capricorn, and her chart ruler becomes Saturn, okay, which is placed in the 12th house. Now, the typical chart ruler that I've heard up until now, which is why it's very confusing, is the ruler of the ascendant. So what's a typical chart ruler that we know of, and I've heard everywhere else, is the ascendant right here is in 29 degrees Sagittarius. Sagittarius ruled by Jupiter, and Jupiter now becomes the chart ruler. Jupiter in Gemini in the 7th house. But according to Firmicus Maternus that we just read, we're seeing that the chart ruler is Saturn in the 12th house. So this is a really interesting thing to discuss, and I'd love to hear in the comments any thoughts, anybody who has any references to this idea, besides for Firmicus's book, Julius Firmicus, and what your thoughts are on this whole approach.